सहना ववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ओम शांति शांति शांति। Namaskar. My dear brothers and sisters, if I ask you the question, is Gita a gospel of action? Most of you would say probably yes, and you would be quite right, because the Gita does say act, don't be lazy, don't be idle, don't have an attachment to inaction. And if I add to this just one more word, is Gita just a gospel of action? Then naturally not only it evokes thought, but it also suggests that Gita is probably much more than just being a gospel of action, trying to prevent us from being lazy. Now what more does the Gita have besides this? And that is what we shall try to see today. If I were to sum up in one sentence what the Gita says about action, it would be that the teaching of the Gita is enlightened action which should be offered to the divine. Now what is enlightened action? Action which is enlightened by knowledge. Now when a doctor treats a patient, he is enlightened by the knowledge which he gained in medical school. But that is not the type of knowledge that the Gita is referring to. The knowledge that the Gita is referring to is the deeper truths of existence, and that is what should enlighten our action. And what does offering to the divine mean? Offering to the divine would be possible only if the one who is doing the work is a devotee. In other words, Gita is advising us that our action should be enlightened by knowledge and should be performed in a spirit of devotion. In other words, action or karma, knowledge or jnana, and devotion or bhakti fuse into one when the Gita is trying to tell us not to be lazy and to act. Now if we look at the teaching of the Gita in relation to action, we find that this message that the action should be enlightened and that the work should be offered to the divine develops slowly. Lord Krishna, like a good teacher, proceeds from the simple to the complex, and that's how the teaching in relation to action, as is the rest of the teaching in the Gita, becomes a developing argument. One of the most widely quoted verses of the Gita in relation to action is Karmanyevadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. You have a right, rather an entitlement to action, not to the fruit. Now what does this entitlement to action mean? What it means is that we can use our free will to make a choice, to do what we like, but that is where our entitlement ends. We are not entitled to what the outcome of our actions would be. Now sometimes this is misinterpreted. The Gita is not saying that we should not expect any outcome. Any thinking person would use his capacity to reason and feel that action A is likely to lead to consequence B, and therefore B will be the outcome of the work. That is not prohibited by the Gita. But we cannot insist on the outcome that we have predicted. Why we should not insist on it is a question that is not easily answered at this stage, but at the same time, in the next line of the same verse comes one little caution that although we are free to use our free will, to decide what we would do. We have an entitlement to the action as we like it. That right we do have. But at the same time, the next line says, Ma karma phala heturbhu. That is not keeping in mind the fruit, not for the sake of the fruit, not for the sake of the outcome, which means that the action should be independent of what we want. And this is what we call in current language disinterested performance of duty. That is, performing our duty without keeping our personal interest in mind. Now, very often disinterested performance of duty is these days said to be the principal message of the Gita. Now, this comes in the second chapter. If this is all that the Gita had to say, then the remaining 16 chapters were not necessary. But in fact, this is only the first amongst a series of developing arguments, the argument in which Arjuna is told by Lord Krishna to renounce the fruit of his action. In the third chapter, Lord Krishna says, Ahankar vimud atma kartaham manyate. That is, it's only an Ahankar vimud atma, one who has been bewildered by his ignorance, one who is confused and puzzled and has developed a warped thinking because of his arrogance, who thinks that I am the karta, karta aham manyate. So he thinks that I am, वो मान बैठता है कि मैं करने वाला हूँ, मैं करता हूँ, karta aham manyate. So now he is told to renounce also the doership. So first he was told to renounce the fruit of the action, now he is told to also renounce the doership. So if he has to renounce the doership, who then is the doer? That needs deeper knowledge, and that deeper knowledge is given over the next series of chapters. And therefore, when in the 11th chapter Arjuna is told, Nimitta matram bhava savyasachin, be only a channel for carrying out what Lord Krishna has already decided. What has he decided? That the Kauravas will die. Mai vaite nihtaha purvameva. So this decision to kill them has already been taken by Lord Krishna, and Arjuna is told that you are dear to me, and therefore I have chosen you to be the channel to channelize my will, my force to kill the Kauravas. And therefore, if we are given a certain task, it is our privilege, like Arjuna, we are dear to the Lord, and therefore he has chosen us as the channel for carrying out the divine will. Now this is not difficult for Arjuna to understand now, because just before this verse in the 11th chapter, he has been given experiential knowledge of the divine. He has seen both the ferocious as well as the benign form of the divine, the form that is not just all love and delight, but also the ferocious form in which the Lord kills and destroys. And therefore, Arjuna can now understand that that can be also a part of the divine will, and that is why I have been chosen for this particular action, and I am dear to the Lord, and that is why, as I have been told, he has chosen me, because he wants me to win the glory of having won the battle, Yasholabhasva, and he wants me to enjoy the prosperous kingdom, Bhunkaksha Rajyam Samriddham. So now for Arjuna, it's not difficult to understand who the doer is. The real doer is the divine, and I am only a channel, an instrument for carrying out the divine will. But then, realizing the glory of the Lord, by the end of the 11th chapter, Arjuna has become a devotee, and therefore he doesn't have to implement the divine will just because the divine knows all, and therefore what the divine is telling him to do will be the best thing to do. He doesn't have to do it just for that reason. He will do out of a sense of devotion to the Lord, and that's why comes the next in this series of developing arguments in the 12th chapter. Maya arpita mano buddhi. That's what he is told. Maya arpita मुझे अर्पित कर दो, गिव अप टू मी, place in my hands what? Your मन and buddhi, your feelings and your intellect, both parts of the mind, the feeling part and the thinking part, hand them over to me. अकल बेच के आ जाओ, किसको? To the Lord. And then he's told, that is what will make you dear to me. Yo mad bhaktah sa me priya. That type of a devotee of mine is dear to me. So now he's told to renounce also his mind. But then if he renounces his mind, does he become completely impotent to think and feel? No, that is not what will happen. Since he is now a devotee, his mind will be enlightened by the hue of the divine mind. In other words, he'll start feeling and thinking the way divine would like him to. His mind would acquire the hue of the Lord. Shyam mori apne hi rang de chunariya. Now the body and the mind are like our chunariya, covering a sort of a cover for the divine that we really are, and this divine will now pass on its hue to the mind, and therefore the person will start thinking and feeling like the divine, and that is the type of devotee who is dear to the Lord. Now this is further said in more explicit terms in the 18th chapter, when the Lord tells Arjuna, man mana bhava, be my minded, have a mind which is like my mind, man mana bhava. Now a devotee, by placing his mind at the disposal of the Lord, gradually becomes his minded. That is, he has the same type of mind as the divine. He feels and thinks the way divine does. Now if the devotee's mind has become the same as the mind of the divine, why need this devotee think with his ordinary mind, or use the various guidelines that he has available from various books and scriptures to decide what is right and wrong? Because he has that ultimate source of all guidance that is available in the world, the best guidance, and that is the way his own mind now thinks, and therefore he does not need that type of guidance. He has become quite independent of that need for the guidance that comes to us from outside, from all types of ethical codes and scriptures and so on and so forth. And therefore it becomes easy to understand the next in the series of this developing argument, when he is told towards the end of the 18th chapter, Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja. Now Sarva dharman parityajya, सारे धर्मों का त्याग कर दो. Abandon all dharmas, forget about them. Now what does dharma mean here? Dharma doesn't mean a specific religion. What dharma means here? The sense of right and wrong. The sense of right and wrong that you have acquired on the basis of all that you have learnt and studied so far, the Shastras and all types of ethical codes that tell us the do's and don'ts of life, what is right and what is wrong. Forget all that you have learnt, abandon it. Now this comes as a rather surprising statement in a religious scripture. It's so surprising that many translators are even afraid to translate it properly. They just go round and round in circles and try to give it some twisted meaning. But the Gita means exactly what these words say. Sarva dharman parityajya, sab dharmon ka tyag kar do, abandon all dharmas, forget them all. But then instead do what? You don't have to lose the sense of right and wrong. How do you know that? Mamekam sharanam vraja, take refuge in me. Lord Krishna is telling Arjun, instead of depending upon all those dharmas, all that you have learned so far about what is right and wrong, take refuge in me, which means consult me, ask me what is to be done. Now this message, Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja, comes at a point when Arjun has become a devotee and has seen the prudence in not depending upon his own limited mind but instead doing what the Lord wants him to do. And therefore he readily says, Nashto moha karishye vachanam tava. Nashto moha, my moha has been destroyed. Moha mera nasht ho gaya hai. All the delusion, the confused thinking, the bewildered thinking that I had has been destroyed. And therefore, karishye vachanam tava. I will do what you are telling me to do. Now here you might ask, it was okay for Krishna to forget about all ethical codes because the divine was there in front of him in flesh and blood. How about us? There are two things important that I would say in answer to this very natural question. Firstly, Arjuna has reached this stage when he can abandon all dharmas only after he has understood everything that went on in the preceding 17 chapters. And therefore, till at least the 16th chapter, even in the Gita, Lord Krishna advises Arjuna to follow the Shastra, to follow those written codes of conduct. And therefore, to qualify for that freedom which comes in that Sarva Dharman Parityajya, to qualify for that freedom, we have to reach the same level as Arjuna had reached in the 18th chapter. The second important thing in answer to that question is that although Arjuna had this good fortune of having Krishna in front of him in flesh and blood, we also have our Krishna within, our soul, the divine within. That is our Krishna within. And it has a dynamic aspect which Sri Aurobindo and the mother have called the psychic being. And they have also told us how we can get into conscious contact with the psychic being and get guidance from there. However, the guidance of the psychic being will also come to us after being filtered by the mind, which might dilute it, which might modify it, and therefore it may become difficult for us to decide of all the ideas, all the thoughts that we are getting about what we should do or what we should not do, which of those choices that we are getting from the mind are a reflection of the divine will, which of those choices is actually coming from our psychic being, and which are coming from the ordinary feeling and thinking mind. To solve this very important question, Sri Aurobindo has provided us some guidance in essays on the Gita, and based on that one could say that to decide that we should ask ourselves 4 questions. The first question is, which of these choices is based on egoistic considerations? Considerations of me, mine and myself, my interests come first, my opinion is more important, and so on and so forth. So any choice which is based primarily on egoistic considerations cannot be the voice of the psychic being, it cannot be the voice of the divine. The second question we should ask is, which of these choices is motivated primarily by worldly gain and loss? Any choice which is motivated primarily by worldly gain and loss will not be the choice coming from the divine. It is not the voice of our psychic being, it is again the voice of our ordinary calculating mind. The third question is, which of these choices is motivated by universal love, love that does not expect anything in return and which is unconditional in nature? Now this type of love which is unconditional, universal and does not expect anything in return is divine love. So the choice that is motivated by this type of love is the choice of the psychic being. And the fourth question is, if we act on the choice of the psychic being, it leaves us in lasting mental peace. So we should ask, which of these choices will leave me in lasting mental peace? This is something which we can anticipate. Before we have done anything, if we ask ourselves sincerely and try to answer this question with total honesty, we know which of these choices will actually leave us in lasting mental peace. And that in fact is the crucial question, because by using all the jugglery which our mind is capable of, we can sometimes say that, well, this choice is not based on my egoistic considerations, I am not bothered about worldly gain and loss, it is based on love. But when it comes to lasting mental peace, that is where it is difficult to cheat ourselves if we are totally honest. And we know that the choice we are making, even if there are 100 reasons to justify it, is the type of choice which will haunt us sooner or later. Which means the lasting part is important. It is only the choice that comes from the psychic being that will never haunt us, it will leave us in lasting mental peace. Now this becomes very relevant to the teachings of the Gita, because Arjun's problem was not mainly how to do his duty as a Kshatriya. That he already knew, that he should do his duty as a Kshatriya in a disinterested manner. His problem was whether to do his duty as a Kshatriya and fight, or whether to respond to his moral sense of not killing so many people, particularly his kith and kin. So that was his problem. His problem was not how to do his duty, but which duty is more important. Now this is a question that not only Arjun had, this is a question that keeps coming up repeatedly to each one of us, and let me take a few examples. We are all familiar with the example of Buddha. His duty as a son was to take over the burden of the kingdom from his father. His duty as a husband and father was to take care of his wife and child, but instead of doing that, he abandoned everything and went away in search of the solution to the miseries of the world. Because that is what his psychic being told him, that is what the divine within told him, and he responded to that voice, and in that process he ended up neglecting what might be called family duty and proceeded to in search of the deeper truths of existence, so that he would be able to get the world free of misery and suffering. Another example from nearer home, the founder of Sri Aurobindo Ashram Delhi branch, whom we popularly call Chachaji. When he was just about 16, Mahatma Gandhi went to the city where he was studying and advised the young people to give up whatever they were doing for a few years and instead jump into the freedom struggle. Now he had his education to complete, he had a career to think of, and he could have also thought of doing what would be in the best interests of his being able to take care of his parents in their old age. But neglecting all that, he jumped into the freedom struggle. He abandoned his career and he abandoned his family and responded to the voice of his psychic being, which was his sort of response to Mahatma Gandhi's call, and jumped into the freedom struggle. This is the type of conflict that many doctors and nurses have faced recently. They have to think of their own safety, they had to think of the safety of their family, and particularly women, and the nurses are mostly women, they had to think of staying away from their children for weeks and months sometimes, at least maintaining a long distance from them, just to be able to perform their duties towards the patients. And so many of them have done that, and in that process a few have also died. But then what were they doing? They were responding to this voice of the psychic being. If they had not done it, instead of lasting mental peace, they would have been haunted repeatedly by the fact, I knew what was the best thing to do, but I didn't do it. So lasting mental peace comes only from listening to the voice of the divine, and we all have access to it because we all have the divine within, and if we make an effort to establish a conscious contact with the divine within, we know what that voice is telling us. And to make sure, the most crucial question to ask is, will this choice leave me in lasting mental peace? So now it becomes easy to understand the sentence that we more or less started with, that the Gita's teaching is about enlightened action which should be offered to the divine. Action enlightened by the light of the divine, and that is possible only if the person is a devotee of the divine. And then if the person realizes that I am not the doer, I haven't determined the outcome, It's only my privilege to be a channel, an instrument for the divine. The person has consecrated his action by offering it to the divine. So that is what enlightened action which is offered to the divine means. So to conclude, the teaching of the Gita is not primarily about how the duty should be done, but rather which duty. Because just to know how the duty should be done, it should be done in a disinterested manner and so on, we do not require a book of the depth and breadth of the Gita. So the teaching of the Gita primarily is not about how to perform our duty, but when we have a conflict between various types of duty, social duty, family duty, professional duty, official duty, moral duty, when one or more of these duties are in conflict with each other, then which duty to perform? And the Gita's answer is perform the divine duty. Select out of these which duty is the divine duty, and the divine duty is that which will leave us in lasting mental peace. So let me end this with a prayer for the light that can illumine our minds so that we can see the whole truth and make choices in light of the divine within. Om Tat Savitur Varam Rupam Jyotih Parasya Dhimahe Yanna Satyena Dipayet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.